Okay, can we pull those lights? There we go. What I'm going to be talking about today are changes in the relative proportions of the hind limb relative to where it meets the ground, the toe, and see how these may have some implications for affecting the patterns of trackways made by three-toed, that is, tridactyl dinosaurs of the various sizes. And I'm going to be looking both at theropods, the meat-eating dinosaurs and their close relatives, and ornithischians, mostly but not entirely ornithopods. None of the quadrupedal ornithischians, but just the ones that may have been bipeds. And I will say, shameless self-promotion, much of this is coming from a book that's coming out later this year, and I'll give you a commercial for it at the end. We're going to be looking at several proxies for the size of the foot and the size of the leg. We'll look at the digit 3 length in skeletons. It's an underestimated proxy for the length of that part of the foot that will routinely touch the ground. Digit 3 is the middle digit of the toe. The proxy for leg length that we'll be using, which is also a bit of an underestimate because it doesn't include articular cartilages or, in some cases, the ankle bones, will be the combined lengths of the femur, tibia, and 3. The overall question we're going to be considering is, does the ratio of leg length, the sum of the lengths of these 3 bones, to digit 3 length, does that have an effect on the step length of the animal as reflected in fossil trackways? And one of the ways we'll be looking at this limb proportion is, again, the sum length of these 3 bones divided by digit 3 lengths, excluding the ungule, the claw-bearing bone, to increase the sample size, but it's the same even if you use the fewer cases where you do have the claw. We'll be considering both obligate bipeds and things that could have been bipeds, but in some cases might have been quadrupeds as well. Tyler did a nice job of explaining what a stride is, so I don't have to use so much. It isn't from where one foot touches down to the next footprint made by the same foot. We'll be looking at the relative stride length, and one of the ways we'll be doing that is the ratio of stride length divided by the footprint length. So, does the leg length to digit 3 ratio change as a function of body size in these bipedal dinosaurs, both within a species, as you go from itty-bitty ones to great big ones, and across species that are of different adult body size? Well, the proxy, the measurement for overall size of the animal that I'm going to be using, will be the sum length of the entire leg, from the femur all the way to the tip of the toe. And so if the ratio does change with size, does this have an effect upon the relative stride length? Well, I gotta say that this project, like so many of my projects, started out with me being confused. I was working on footprints, and I wanted to get some idea, well, we're going to see any changes in trackway patterns as these throw up. And I said, well, first let's look at the limb proportions in animals where I know it's one species. And so I went and started measuring alligators. And these are live alligators that I measured, not dead, well, some cases are dead, but they were, some of them I had helped catch. But we looked at the intact animal, and we looked at an equivalent to what we're looking at in the dinosaurs. And this is the leg length, this part plus that part, plus the metatarsal region, divided by the toe portion, digit 3 length. And the alligators from very small individuals, all just a little bit bigger than hatchlings, to almost as big as they get. And you can see that the ratio does go up as the animals get bigger. Alligators, like puppies, grow into their feet, or toes, I should say. I found an unpublished thesis where they were looking at this kind of thing in the skeletons of chickens, where they are looking at the ratio of femur plus tibiotarsus plus tarsometatarsals divided by digit 3 as you go from itty-bitty Easter baby chickens all the way to big ones that Colonel Sanders would love. And again, you see that it does increase as the animals get bigger. So I was happy. Both alligators and chickens, which are living relatives of non-eating dinosaurs, increase this leg to toe ratio as they grow up. We might expect the same to have been true for non-eating dinosaurs. And again, we can ask, would this affect, would the ratio change not only within the species, but across species of different size? And here's where I got confused. Because when I start looking at data for tyrannosaurs, it does just the opposite. As they get bigger, the ratio of leg length to digit 3 length goes down. But bear in mind, there are no babies in this sample. They're all kind of pretty well grown, or half grown at that point. And notice there's something odd going on with this fairly small dinosaur here. So this got me wondering what is going on. So I started systematically gathering data on limb proportions and digit 3 from as many different kinds of theropod dinosaurs and bipedal ornithischian dinosaurs as I could get my calipers on. I didn't have a whole lot of data for baby non-eating theropods, so I said, what the heck, let's do Mesozoic birds. I mean, why not? I mean, maybe because they're doing this, it's going to be a little bit different, but it's still going to be kind of interesting to see how they plot relative to these dinosaurs. And here's what I get. Now, this overall leg length is going that way, and the ratio of leg length to digit 3 is doing this. But if you, and I've color-coded them according to different things. All these guys in black and white are various kinds of birds. And if we could stretch this out and load this up, even though this is kind of squashing things together, it does increase. And in fact, if you fit a quadratic equation to this, you get a pretty reasonable relationship. R squared value, for those who know about that sort of thing, around 0.37, which, close enough for government work, especially in the shutdown. And so the ratio does seem to increase in size from very small animals to those with a total limb length of around 1 meter, and then it starts going down again. So, does this show up in the trackway evidence? And in particular, does it show up in the ratio of stride length to footprint length? So I went and studied here, basically, going through my own measurements of dinosaur trackways and going through every paper I could find in the literature. Got data for a couple thousand trackways represented here, where I plot the average footprint length within a trackway against the stride length, and you get a kind of main sequence of points. If you look at where things are densest, where the step length or the stride length does get bigger as the animal gets bigger, but you notice it kind of flattens out in the very biggest guys in this kind of main sequence. And you get above this main sequence a bunch of scattered points, which presumably are those made by running dinosaurs. Now, if you look at the ratio of stride length to footprint length as a function of overall footprint length, here's that main sequence again, and here are the runners, presumably, and the overall thing is kind of shaped sort of like a right triangle. Not only is the kind of general trend getting smaller as the animals get bigger in the main sequence, but we get fewer and fewer of the really big guys doing the running. Now, I looked at this a different way. I started breaking down the data according to size classes. So that, say, from 0 to 5 centimeters, size class 1, itty bitty ones. I looked at all of the trackways in the back. Size class 2 is from 5 to 10, size class 3, and so on, all the way to the very big guys. You can see the distribution of values as you go of the stride to footprint length ratio as you go from the little guys to the big ones. And the parameter I use to sort of give an average is the median. Now the median is the halfway point, such that exactly half the cases will be smaller, half will be larger. I think that's better to use than the mean here. To help you understand the median, there's a story, possibly apocryphal, about a United States senator who was appalled to learn that half the people in the United States had income levels below the median level. These are the kind of people who shut down governments. Anyway, if you look at these distributions, it does look, even though there's not as many data as I like, only 22 trackways in the very smallest, the median is around 8, and as you go to slightly larger, it gets down to 9, and then it starts going down, getting smaller and smaller as you get toward the big guys. That's more or less consistent with what I saw in the pattern of the ratio of limb length to digit 3 length. Furthermore, as you look at the maximum stride to footprint length, real runners, you notice that you don't get any more of the really, really, really fast running guys with the really, really, really long stride lengths as you go to the biggest ones. So again, this does seem to be consistent with, the trackway evidence does seem to be consistent with what I would have predicted on the basis of the limb length to digit 3 ratio. I tried another approach to these data. And that is, if you look at the same plot we had a minute ago, we've put the main sequence trackways, as we call them, in black, and here are in the red ones, the ones that are above the main sequence. we fit a curve to that to predict what we would expect the step length of a normally walking dinosaur with a footprint of whatever that length happens to be, what we would expect the stride length to be. And then we look at the ratio to what we observe in the runners to be expected and see how that varies as a function of footprint length. So again, these are only data for the guys that are above the main sequence, the ones that we think are running. And this is what the plot looks like. Look at the maximum difference or deviation from expectations. It footprints in the same size range of around 30 to 40 centimeters, and then it does go down as you get smaller, and if you look at the size frequency distributions, we get the same sort of pattern as well. So the maximum ratio is at footprint lengths of 30 to 40 centimeters, and it declines at the bigger ones. And it's at least partly consistent with what we observed with the leg length to digit 3 length, at least for the bigger guys. The large theropods either didn't run or they didn't do it very often. So how fast were they going? Well, this is arm waving time. First, we have to estimate how long the hind limb was relative to the digit 3 length. So these are some preliminary data for various kinds of things. There's the digit 3 length versus the length of the femur plus the tibia and plus the metatarsal 3. And I have to admit, I was astonished by how tight that relationship is. I was expecting a whale of a lot more variability than that. But it may turn out that there will be more variability, so I had more data points, but this is what I've got so far. So we fit a third degree polynomial to this to get what we would expect the leg length to be. Again, keep in mind this is going to be a minimum estimate of the leg length. Just like the digit 3 length is going to be slightly smaller than the actual length of the footprint. So then we plug that into the very famous Alexander equation, and this is the kind of estimated speeds we get. We get top speeds estimated somewhere between 25 or 30 kilometers per hour. Note that these estimated speeds are a bit smaller than what you usually get if you make a simple conversion of 4 times the footprint length. And I suspect, though, that this might be more realistic, and because we don't even include the cartilages and all that kind of stuff, even this may be a bit too high. But in any case, the fastest theropods seem to be at footprint lengths of around 20 to 40 centimeters. If you want to get some visualization of comparing this with known animals, these are going to be animals that are going to be roughly equivalent in size at the small end to emus, and then ostriches, and then at the larger end maybe to typical Allosaurus and larger ornithomimosaurs. This is a good example of a running dinosaur trackway. That's a meter stick. There are the 3 footprint sequences, and it's that trackway right there, which I found at a site in Texas in the early 1980s. Well, so far, I was pretty happy because there seemed to be agreement between the pattern of the effective size on the leg length to digit 3 length and the pattern of the stride length to footprint length, and I should have stopped there. But I didn't. Instead, I went on and started doing bipedal or potentially bipedal ornithischians. Again, we start with the skeletal data, looking at the ratio of femur plus tibia plus metatarsal 3 divided by digit 3 length as a function of the entire leg length. And like theropods in the ornithischians, the ratio increases from the smallest animals to those with leg lengths of about 1,000 millimeters, about a meter. But then unlike the theropods, they just keep going into the things like the iguanodonts and the hadrosaurs. That was interesting. But then what really got annoying is then when I looked at the stride to footprint ratio for the ornithischians. All you would expect if the leg length relative to the digit 3 length is getting larger and larger and larger as they get bigger, so would the stride to footprint length ratio. And it doesn't. It goes down. It does the same thing that we saw with theropods. How annoying. I also broke down the data in terms of size frequency distributions as we have here. Don't have a whole lot of trackways for the really little guys, but sort of like theropods, the distribution of values shows that there seems to be a decrease in size, although we don't have that slight increase between the smallest and the next largest size class. But otherwise, the big guys seem to be taking relatively shorter steps than the little guys. Then, if you start comparing the ornithischians with the theropods in terms of the trackway identifications, here I've plotted, there's the theropod relationship again, here's the ornithischian relationship. At total lengths greater than 1 meter, the ornithischians show a larger length to digit 3 length ratio than the theropods. But at all sizes, trackways attributed to theropods generally have a larger stride to footprint length ratio than do trackways attributed to ornithischians, which is not what you would expect if the length to digit 3 length is the only factor affecting the stride to footprint length ratio. Now, I won't go into this in great detail, except to say that each of these points down is for a different footprint fauna, broken down by size class, the various size classes, and of the theropods and of the ornithischians within those size classes. And I got the median value for the trackways that I think were made by walkers. You know, I sort of had a cutoff at the stride to footprint length ratio of 10 or less. And that may be even a little too generous, but anyway, I calculated the median there. And I plot that median against the maximum stride to footprint length ratio we find in any trackways from that particular size class or type of animal and fauna. And there's a nice relationship there. So it suggests to me that whatever is affecting the median stride to footprint length ratio is also affecting the maximum value. Okay. To summarize, in theropods, the stride to footprint length ratio across different animal sizes does seem to be consistent with what is seen in the leg length to digit 3 ratio across different size classes, but not in ornithischians. Why not? Well, one possibility is that large ornithischians may have been, things like hadrosaurs and so forth, may have been mainly quadrupedal. And many of the trackways that I used for the ornithischians in the study, I know that they were quadrupedal trackways, but I saw no good reason for separating them out, because sometimes you might have something that looks like it's a bipedal trackway, but it's just because the hindfoot is stepped out and squashed the front foot track. Another possibility, ornithischians were mainly herbivores and so less active than theropods, but some of the theropods make it herbivorous or omnivorous. There's another possibility, the really big ornithischians have this large heel pad in some footprints, and that may be artificially increasing the length of the footprints relative to the foot skeleton. And the last one, my least favorite hypothesis, is the idea that the leg length to digit 3 ratio really isn't a significant factor affecting relative stride length, and that what I found in the agreement in the theropod data was simply a nasty coincidence. I don't think that's the case, and I certainly hope it isn't the case. But in any case, be that as it may, one result does seem to hold true for both theropods and the ornithischians. Small dinosaurs seem to take relatively larger step lengths than the bigger dinosaurs. They thus seem to have been bouncier than their bigger cousins. Thank you. The nasty commercial. This is a book that I have coming out later this year to be published by Indiana University Press. It summarizes my 30 years' work on skeletons and experiments with ground birds like emus, and I try to apply this to identifying, as best I can, the kinds of dinosaurs responsible for the classic New England footprint fauna. And I will go out on the limb now, and I shouldn't tell you this because I should keep quiet so you'll go buy the book, but I'll go right out now and say I think Tyler is absolutely right. I think Ubrontes is a thing. The Ubrontes nature is a theropod, a prosauropod, and I don't think Rallitor goes up to Ubrontes. If you want to know why I think that, see me later. Meantime, buy the book when it comes out. Thank you very much. Question? Yeah.
Why are your ravens Noah's ravens?
It's an obscure joke, and it may be that I'm the only person on the planet who finds it funny. But, okay. When the first trackway of a bipedal dinosaur was found in the northeastern United States, in a little farm in western Massachusetts, they joked that it had been made by none other than Noah's raven. Well, I've done a lot of work in zoos in the course of this project, working with emus and rheas and bustards and all kinds of other things. So I figured, okay, to honor that joke, to honor the memory of the legendary keeper of the world's biggest ocean-going zoo, I would extend the nickname from one trackway to those of tridactyl dinosaurs generally, and dubbed a lot of them Noah's ravens. Again, I may be the only person who thinks that's funny. Wow, it's quiet. Too quiet. Yes?
What would you say is the maximum speed of the Tyrannosaur based on your research?
Yeah, no, I'm trying to think. If I look back at my graph, I would estimate, but...
Yeah, you said it could make people lots.
Oh, I'm going the wrong way. Yes, indeed. Well, based on the trackway evidence, all right, we'll get there in a minute. All right. 10 kilometers an hour.
That's fair.
I don't know. That's based on the track, but that's just our weighted guess. That's based on what we see in the trackway evidence. And, it could be that sometimes they did better than what we see. Yeah. No, that's just something that's about that size. Yeah. We don't have any good, to the best of my knowledge, we don't have a good trackway of Tyrannosaurus itself. Yes?
You said you used Alexander's equation. Did
Yeah.
you get any different results with Thulburns or using a hybrid between the two?
When you say Thulburns, are you talking about his corrections or his conversions from footprint leg length?
Yeah.
Well, no, I use my own.
Oh.
Others?
But it's kind of interesting.
All right, okay, let the show go on. Okay.